And welcome back. We have been joined on the set this morning by attorney and, of course, Caribbean Shores Area Representative Kareem Musa. As promised, we're going to be discussing details of the new legislation that was passed that has been introduced on Friday. Good morning, Mr. Musa.
Good morning, Isani, and good morning, Marlene. Thank you very much for having me on this morning.
No problem. Let's begin by discussing, perhaps from your perspective, how you saw things unfold in the House on Friday in respect of the introduction of this new piece of legislation, its read through, and of course the position that was taken by the party that you represent.
Yes, well, as you know, Isani, we have to first of all look at the fact that this bill was presented while a case is still ongoing in the Supreme Court and in the Court of Appeal regarding the special agreement and the constitutionality, whether or not that special agreement that was signed by the Foreign Minister in 2008 is in fact constitutional. As you know, the Chief Justice had denied the injunction on that point. And so what we have to consider now is that there is a live appeal, and I'm informed that Senior Counsel Eamon Courtney, as of while we were in the House, actually in the House on Friday, he had filed a cross appeal. Remember, we have 21 days after the ruling of the Chief Justice within which we have to file our cross appeal in the Court of Appeal. And that was done on Friday while we were in the House. That appeal surrounds the very narrow argument of the special agreement and the constitutionality of that special agreement. Now, leading up to the House meeting on Friday, I can tell you this because it is now public knowledge. Both the member for Orange Walk South and myself mentioned it in the House. The People's United Party met on Wednesday prior to the House meeting, and we discussed what it was that the Prime Minister was likely to do, because as of that day and time, we did not have in our possession what it was the Prime Minister was going to do. So then we look back at what the Chief Justice had ruled, and in fact he ruled that we're going to grant an injunction because this writ appears to be defective. And so what we thought the Prime Minister was going to do was to amend the Referendum Act under Section 3, I believe, where it says that for any matter of national importance, you can then introduce it to the House, and with a simple majority, you can have a referendum on any matter. We thought that's what he was going to do. So we were expecting that. And we met on Wednesday as a caucus, and we decided, you know what, he's curing the defective writ as the Chief Justice has initially identified. And so perhaps it would be a good idea to vote yes in favor of this bill, of this amendment, because we thought it was an amendment. Little did we know, Thursday now, the day before the actual House meeting, we were sent a copy of the bill. And when we got the bill, we realized, but this is not just a simple amendment. This is actually now asking us in the opposition to go against everything that we've been fighting for to this day in the Supreme Court and now in the Court of Appeal, which is to validate the special agreement that was signed by the Foreign Minister in 2008. Because at Clause 3 it says we're going to have a referendum in accordance with the special agreement. We didn't think that that was going to be the format the Prime Minister was going to take. So having seen that now, what the opposition is faced with, it is as though the Prime Minister is coming to us and saying now at this very late stage, we want a 2/3 majority, because that is what the Constitution requires, that on any matter that touches on the Constitution, such as our borders, because remember the special agreement says we're giving the power to the ICJ to determine our borders, our boundaries, such a matter requires a 2/3 majority. So we thought that it was a very disingenuous attempt on the part of the Prime Minister to try to get that 2/3 majority. And so we had to pull back on our original position, which was to vote yes so that we have this referendum, because, you know, let's be real, a lot of people are anxious. Many of them were anxiously awaiting the chance to have a voice in this referendum, and we have to give that to them. And then there's also another half of the country that was really relieved. We have to be real about this. They were relieved because they don't feel as though they've had a good education campaign on the part of the government. And so they saw it as an opportunity for us to get another bite at the cherry before we go to the referendum.
What I'm hearing from you is that essentially you would have supported, the opposition would have supported an amendment to the Referendum Act to allow for the referendum to take place.
Correct. On whether or not we should take the dispute between Belize and Guatemala to the ICJ.
But because, and the devil's always in the details, the details of the bill had a portion where it would legitimize the special agreement. That's where you stood against it.
That is correct.
Now, I want to, because this is such a complex issue, and you mentioned a few points. First of all, I want to go back to what you mentioned about lead counsel, senior counsel, Eamon Courtney, introducing a challenge, because that's an important development as well. Yes. It has been clearly articulated by the government that the only point which the Chief Justice saw merit in was the point that he used to issue the injunction, which was the writ of referendum didn't quite match up. Something was off with it. And all the other points, like the constitutionality of the special agreement, didn't really hold much weight.
Yes.
So this challenge now means, and I'm trying to, let me make it as simple as possible. We're at the Senate where a bill may possibly be ratified, may be passed, that will legitimize the special agreement, while at the same time at the Court of Appeal, there is a challenge going back to the very original point that we've been hearing from the opposition, which is the special agreement is unconstitutional.
All right, let me divide those two and show you the difference. They are not legitimizing the special agreement. They are legitimizing and ratifying the fact that we're going to a referendum. In order for us to have ratified the special agreement, would have meant 2/3 majority.
Yes.
So that is the difference. They took a bill to the House for a referendum. Sure, you have the majority on your side, that's going to go through. But in terms of the special agreement and ratifying that, that was never done, because that requires, in our opinion, that's what the opposition is saying, that's what our senior counsel is advising us, that requires a 2/3 majority. So let us be very clear that in our respectful opinion, we are not legitimizing or ratifying the special agreement by what happened on Friday. That is just saying we're going to a referendum. To dissect now the special agreement and the constitutionality of it, we have to go to the Court of Appeal and possibly the Caribbean Court of Justice. And I heard you just now say that indeed the Chief Justice has ruled on that first ground that we applied for, which was that the special agreement was unconstitutional. Now let's be very clear, the Chief Justice has not given a definitive ruling on that. What was before the Chief Justice was an injunction application, and so you have a very cursory look at your grounds. You don't go in depth into it, even though the government said they went 53 pages into their legal submissions. That's not the purpose of the injunction hearing. And so what is left to be seen? Today we go before the Chief Justice. Again, this is what I mentioned to the Deputy Prime Minister, that this is a live issue, because he said, oh, the PUP is going to have a new case. It's not a new case. Unlike the previous matters that the Prime Minister has gone to the House to fix, those matters had concluded all the way to the CCJ. This is still in Supreme Court, going to the Court of Appeal. We have to remember that, a live issue. So today we have a court case, and it is left to be seen whether or not the Chief Justice will say, I have ruled definitively, and so your only recourse now is to go to the Court of Appeal. Or is he going to hear arguments on that first point? So he is going to have to decide on that today. But as I mentioned, we have already filed our cross appeal on the injunction portion of it. So that is before the Court of Appeal. So we have two live issues, one before the Supreme Court and one before the Court of Appeal. And I know it sounds very distressing, Marlene.
It is very complicated. And I'm just, I always try to imagine what it's like to be a voter who is completely undecided, confused with everything they've been hearing, and not knowing how to feel about moving forward. And I think it's a very difficult position that we're putting a lot of people in. But this is the point we want to clarify. So if there is, and let me simplify the question. If we go to a referendum and the court rules in favor of the current challenge, which is that the special agreement is unconstitutional. What does that mean for a vote that may take place in May or early June?
Yes, and that is why we have been pleading with the Prime Minister that given the fact that this is still a live issue before the courts, given the fact that there's no definitive ruling by the Caribbean Court of Justice, we should do like all other cases and await that verdict before we actually take it to a referendum. Because the sad reality is that if the Caribbean Court of Justice were to rule that in fact the special agreement required a two-thirds majority in the National Assembly as provided for in the Constitution, that could totally reverse whatever happens at the referendum. So again, we have to be very aware and conscious of this, because I think we've missed this point. It is not just important that we are in conformity with our own laws, but we have to remember that in that very special agreement, we signed on to an agreement with Guatemala saying that we would ensure that we would have a referendum in accordance with the national laws of our respective countries. So we don't only have an obligation to the Belizean people to ensure we have a legal referendum. On the international plane, with Guatemala, we have guaranteed them that we will have a legal referendum. So just imagine for 1 minute, it is not the opposition doing this, but Guatemala doing this. And we go all the way to the ICJ, and the ICJ says, you know what, Belize, you have won your case. Guatemala, go about your business. You have no play, no say here in Belize. What if Guatemala were to say, hold your horses, Mr. ICJ. Look at this. Look at this contractual obligation in this treaty, which says that you, Belize, were to have a referendum in accordance with your national laws, and you never did that. You did something in complete violation of your constitution. Remember now, Guatemala has postponed their thing twice because they needed to get it right. And so my point is very simple. Why don't we just ensure that we get it right? It won't take 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. This could all be wrapped up in the Caribbean Court of Justice in as little as 6 months to a year. So I again want to impress on the Prime Minister. We have an opportunity here for us to take things, you know, in a very sensible, reasonable, and legal fashion. Let's just take our time with this.
Let me break up the conversation just a little bit from the heavy legal stuff.
Yeah.
And let's go back to the House on Friday.
Yes.
In respect of your father's position, I know that as one of the former foreign ministers, he has come forward to say yes to go into the ICJ. And as a politician on the same political organization, you have said no at this point.
Yes.
Were you at all prepared for the position that he took in the House on Friday?
I was prepared. I drive up with my dad to Belmopan, and like I mentioned on Wednesday, he was at that meeting where we had all agreed that if it is a simple amendment to the Referendum Act, we were all going to vote yes. So we were on the same side, so to speak, on Wednesday. But on Thursday, he didn't come to the meeting where we saw the bill for the very first time and then realized what the Prime Minister was doing with the special agreement, trying to get the two-thirds majority. And so there was a reversal. So I didn't get to speak with him until Friday morning on our way to Belmopan. And on the drive there, he mentioned that, you know, I'm going to abstain. So I didn't know what was going.
And your reaction was?
My reaction, you know, this man has been in this thing for so long. This ICJ really was under his administration. He took it from 1998 all the way to 2008. And I would say that he did a great job with it up to that point. And let me just break to your question 1 minute there, Isani, because what I believe is an important aspect for us to consider, because I hear the government side saying this a lot on Friday. They're saying that this is your baby, this is PUP's thing, why don't they abandon it? There has been, and we need to accept this from all quarters, there has been a lack of continuity in terms of administration to administration. Yes, the People's United Party gave birth to this ICJ baby, and we took it all the way to 2008. But we have to look at what happened from 2008 to 2019. There has been a lack of continuity. The Prime Minister and the Foreign Minister both went on the media, and this is part of the court case, And even they acknowledged this special agreement has to go to the National Assembly. They said that. So what has happened since then? Yes, the PUP was responsible to take it to 2008, but the foreign minister is the one that signed on to it.
Yeah.
But after signing on to it, what do? You then take it to the National Assembly, as you yourself acknowledge in an interview. Why haven't you done that? So we have to look at that. But going back to your question about my dad, I think that regardless of how much the UDP government has botched it, in my opinion, and he himself acknowledged that, you know what, we shouldn't be leaving 2,500 Belizeans behind, the diaspora behind. We should really be working towards these things. As much as he can acknowledge that there are those blunders that have been made, he still believes, because this is his baby, that he will move forward with a yes to the ICJ. And I have to admire him, and I have to respect him, and I love him for that, because listen, he took some serious blows from his own side, from Honorable Julius Espat on Friday. And that's just the kind of person he is. He's been taking blows all his life. But that's the kind of conviction that he has, that nobody's going to tell him on this national issue how he's going to vote, when in fact he was the one leading the charge. And I have to respect that.
So on a personal note, if you allow me to ask a follow-up question there. How divisive has this issue been in terms of your family dynamics?
We meet every Sunday for lunch, and very heated, I have to tell you that this ICJ issue, and it's not just in the House of Representatives. We know how dirty and how crazy and nasty politics can get, but the ICJ issue has got to be, and I'm sure you all are feeling the same way, the mother of all heated debates, whether it's in households, whether it's among friends, among work colleagues. People are passionate on both sides. And my position has always been that we have to respect the two sides, because we are all using as our strength the 1859 treaty. There are those in the no camp saying we have a title already, why we need to go to ICJ? We have to respect that. We don't got title. Then there are those that are saying we have such a strong case that yes, let us go to the ICJ. And so we have to have respect for all sides. And at the end of the day, when all of this fades away, we are only left with our own convictions. And my father has always taught me, Isani, that you have to stand on your own and you have to have your own convictions. And so if it is that you strongly believe that before going to the ICJ we need a Sarsoon protocol, then you stick to that. That is what you believe in. So you stick to that. And so he respects it. Although we have these heated debates, he respects my position and I respect his.
Coming back to the challenges, and one of the things you pointed out is that the process of getting to the referendum is what seems to be the greatest concern coming out of the opposition with the challenge. And we've heard very clearly from the PUP, we just want you to do it the right way.
Yes.
We've heard from the government that the PUP is delaying the referendum deliberately. When you talk about a 6-month to 1-year window, one of the things I found interesting from your father's presentation was saying very clearly, sometimes you don't have to oppose for opposition's sake.
Yes.
And I would venture to guess there's a large population in this country that feels that the opposition is in court challenging this issue because they're opposing for opposition's sake.
Yeah, for the sake.
And I would buy into that argument, Marlene, if it was that we were going on a whim, if we were going on something that didn't have any legal basis. I could appreciate that argument. But for them to say that we're obstructionists, if you want to call us obstructing an illegal referendum, then by all means, we obstructing an illegal referendum. You would not have wanted, Mr. Prime Minister, for Guatemala to have obstructed that. So it's best that we get it right at home. So let me be very clear. The only party and the only side that has been obstructing and depriving citizens of their rights is the government side. They promised and they undertook that they were going to look into the 2,500 voters that wanted to have a say, because they went in on time. Let us not forget that. It's not as though they came after the deadline and I want to vote. No, they went in before, but because rat ate the paperwork or because their pages were torn out, they can't have that opportunity to vote. And so don't say that the opposition is depriving people of their rights. You are. You are the ones who also voted against the diaspora bill, saying that we're not going to allow them to vote in this referendum. So let's be very clear. It's not the PUP depriving anybody of their right. We were prepared on Wednesday to go to a simple referendum on whether or not we should take this matter to the ICJ. That was our position Wednesday. The UDP knew that. But on Thursday, they had to throw in that special agreement to make this thing very complicated once again.
With a new date being set, do you believe that perhaps this would give the Vital Statistics Unit and the Elections and Boundaries Department additional time to be able to address the quagmire that these 2,500 persons have found themselves in?
It's going to require very innovative ideas on the part of the government and the opposition, and certainly social partners to buy in as well, because a lot of us, Isane, feel that had we known the situation at Vital Stats, maybe we would never have asked for a re-registration exercise, because disenfranchising so many voters is totally undemocratic in this day and age with computerized system and technology where everything is supposed to be recorded properly. It's really a disgrace for our country to be in this position. But as far as I'm aware, at Vital Stats, they have this system of a proof of birth. And so we have to now sort of set up rules. The government and the opposition now have to set up rules in the event your birth paper or your record was eaten by rats, or in the event it was torn out of the book. What is the procedure from here? Maybe, first of all, do you have a social security card? Yes. Were you previously registered to vote before this re-registration exercise? Yes. Can you get a proof of birth? Can you go to somebody in your village or in your neighborhood and sign if your parents are deceased and say you were born at the Belize City Hospital or you're born in PG to this midwife? Can you get an affidavit from a couple people confirming that? Then perhaps we would look at maybe getting those people back on the voter roll. But it's a definite tightrope that we're walking. But we have to do it because now we're in a very difficult quagmire, and we're looking at future elections, not just this referendum. What are we going to do? So we have to solve that problem. We cannot just let it go like that.
All right, what we're going to do right now is take a quick break in the conversation. When we come back, we'll continue the discussion, and of course, we'll start looking at some of the details in the bill itself. So please stay tuned.
When someone you love becomes a memory, the memory becomes a treasure. Channel 5 introduces the Daily Obituaries. The Daily Obituaries will broadcast all death and funeral announcements and memorials to honor your loved one's life and memories. The Daily Obituaries airs on Channel 5 prior to the evening newscast, with subsequent repeats at 10 p.m. and 12 noon the following day. It will also be placed online on our social media platforms, all for a standard package fee. Celebrate their lives and memories with Channel 5's Daily Obituaries. Honor in life and reverence in death.
Just joining us, we're continuing our conversation with attorney and member of the House of Representatives, Kareem Musa, as we discuss the Belize Territorial Dispute Referendum Act that was presented in the House on Friday and going to the Senate this morning. One of the things we really wanted to get out of this conversation is looking at what is being proposed in the bill. And so there are quite a few changes from what would have been done typically through the Referendum Act that this bill allows for. And I want to talk about those substantial changes.
Sure. As I mentioned in the first segment, one of the things that the opposition was expecting the Prime Minister to have done was a simple amendment to the Referendum Act, because we already have a Referendum Act in place, and so it was just to fall under the proper and appropriate section, which I believe was Section 3, that in the national interest we are to have a referendum on the ICJ issue. So we were anticipating that. we weren't anticipating an entirely new bill. So now we have two bills. We have a Referendum Act and we have a Belize Territorial Dispute Referendum Act 2019. And so what you will find throughout the course of reviewing this new bill is that it is saying that if any other bill is inconsistent with this one, for example, we could find many inconsistencies with the Referendum Act, but this one is saying that this trumps that. This is the godfather, so to speak, of the bills. But we have to remember that even though it says that in the event of inconsistencies, that this will override any other bill, nowhere and no how could a bill be higher than the Constitution.
I was going to ask that, because what it says very clearly in the end of the bill, if there is inconsistency between the provisions of this act and the provisions of any other law, the provisions of this act shall prevail.
Yes, the any other law does not include the Constitution, because the Constitution trumps everything else. That is the supreme law. That is right.
But if there are discrepancies between this law and the Referendum Act,
that is correct.
Or what about the ROPA, the Representation of the People
Act?
Act?
In terms of this specific referendum, this trumps all other laws. Except the Constitution. I keep having to repeat that. But another provision that we found was inconsistent with the Referendum Act is that now we see that the time has been abridged for the holding of this specific referendum. So before, the Referendum Act says 30 days, within 30 days of the Governor General issuing the writ of referendum, we are to have a referendum. This one says at paragraph 5, I believe it is. If we can go to paragraph 5, here we go. The Governor General shall, within 5 days of receiving a request under Section 4, issue a writ of referendum to the returning officers of the electoral divisions of Belize. And if we go on, I think that it says, there's a 4, paragraph 5(4). The day stated in the writ of referendum for the holding of the referendum shall not be less than 10 days after the issue of the writ of referendum. So before we had a 30-day period. Now it has been reduced to 10 days. Well, within 5 days, the Governor General is to issue the writ. And 10 days after that is published, we are then to have a referendum. So there's an abridgment of time that has taken place in this specific referendum.
Do you assume from that that perhaps there's already a date set in mind and the law was created to match that? Because why would the 30-day period need to change?
But it wouldn't be far-fetched to think that this is all calculated.
If you want and I'm going to be totally and brutally honest here, if I may. We have a live issue before the courts, Isani. Say, for example, the Court of Appeal on Thursday says we are going to have this injunction review on the 15th of May. That's, less than 30 days away. But what is less than 30 days is this, 10 days. And so the Prime Minister can, in effect, beat out the Court of Appeal's May 15th date by having the referendum on May the 6th, May the 7th, May the 8th, whatever the case may be. And so abridging the time, I'm not saying that that is what the Prime Minister is doing, but certainly it has to cross your mind. That is he trying to beat out any court of law from having a decision on this matter? Why is he abridging the time? I don't find it necessary at all to abridge the time, but he has done so.
Well, I mean, I think that was one of the questions I had in cutting down the 30-day period, because we are looking at break for Easter. People kind of take a little bit of recovery time after that to get their minds back in gear. But I did find that interesting. So give me a timeline. How does this work? So the Senate, if it passes through the Senate today, then it has to go to the Governor General.
Yes. As early as tomorrow, Marlene, the Governor General the Prime Minister can request of the Governor General that he issue the writ of referenda in accordance with this act. He then has 5 days. He can even do it in 1 day. So even as the same day he receives the writ, tomorrow, the request, he can issue the writ. It's not that he has to wait 5 days. He has to do it within 5 days. And so within 5 days, so between Tuesday and Thursday to Holy Thursday, he might issue it Tuesday or Wednesday. And once he issues that writ and the writ is published, the referendum will then have a date in there. A minimum of 10 days from the date of that. So It could be anywhere from next week Friday, you could have a referendum, or it can be 100 days, it can be 6 months, whatever the case may be. And that is why we in the opposition have been urging the Prime Minister, let us take a little slow down on this, let us take a pause, because if you do something as rushed as that, the Belizean people, knowing that there's an injunction in courts, they're not going to go and vote on the merits of the ICJ. They're going to be going and be voting on many other things other than that. So it's very important for us to take a pause. And I even hear our party leader saying very clearly to the government, let us use the opportunity to see where we can find common ground. Let us work on this national unity. On this ICJ issue. And I go back to an interview with Assad Shuman on Krem, on WB. It was a very heated interview between Mose and Assad, but one thing that stuck out to me was when Assad Shuman said very clearly that up to 2008, and this goes back to the lack of continuity point that I was raising, there was a united front, both the government and the opposition. And since 2008 to present, there's no longer that united front. And what Assad Shuman said was that, yes, both parties are to blame for this thing becoming politicized, but at the end of the day, what Assad said, it is the government's responsibility, not the opposition, to reach across the aisle and to ensure that we have this united front and to ensure we have a bipartisan approach on this very important issue. And so I repeat the party leader's call at this time. Let us try to find some common ground. Let us try to resolve these issues, and so we can move forward.
But can I say, though, how does, I mean, I hear the message, and it's a wonderful message to hear, but let's look at it practically. You're on opposite sides of the coin here.
Yes.
The PUP is saying, no, we want a no vote in the referendum, and the government is clearly saying yes.
Well,
what common ground exists for the bipartisanship to occur?
Let me say this, that because there's only two choices on the ballot, we begin to think that there's only two options out there, yes or no. I look at this whole process as a continuum. There's no, there's let's get it right, and there's yes to the ICJ. A lot of the People's United Party area reps and standard bearers are in the middle. They want to get it right first. Yes, you do have a lot of hardliners who are no now, no forever. Let us accept that. I don't think they form the majority. They can argue with me and say, no, we do, but I don't think they do. I think most of the PUP is somewhere in the middle because they want to get it right. So if you have the majority of the opposition being at that position, then that leaves room for discussions with the government to see how we can correct the wrongs that have happened in the past.
And when you say correct the wrongs, you mean going back to the special agreement?
The special agreement is one issue for us to get a 2/3 majority in the House, for us to review it and see how we can fix it, because a lot of us are not happy with the language in there. We're looking at the Sarsoon Protocol. Guatemala has an election, a general election coming up in 2 months. And who is to say that their new president would not be more amenable to ensuring we have peace in the Sarsoon? Because it cannot be that in 2008 you agree to go to court and then in 2015 you totally strong-arm the Sarsoon. That's irregular, and according to Professor Vassiani, that is an illegal act, and it is contrary to international law, completely in violation of international law. So Sarsoon Protocol has to be at the very top of that, looking at fixing the voter rolls, getting those people back on the voter rolls, and considering the diaspora vote. Those three are at least my important ones. I heard the Prime Minister say that after a referendum we can amend the Maritime Areas Act. I insist that we must amend the Maritime Areas Act, and I can see what he's saying, so I'm willing to consider that after a referendum, that we can amend that. So those are things that we have to look at. You have to remember that there was a long list, and it's all about chipping away at those concerns. One of my major concerns, if you remember, I came here about 6 months ago, and it was the fact that we had on our front line a foreign minister who was not doing a good job for Belize. The Prime Minister has put the foreign minister on the back bench, and he's no longer the front person. So that, in my mind, satisfies that concern. And so we're whittling away at these different concerns. And I see that there is this opportunity for the government and opposition to work together to find that common ground.
I'm trying to figure out, because clearly there has to be some, and we're going way forward in perhaps a hypothetical that people say is idealistic. But if there is a bipartisan attempt, it does mean that there has to be some compromise as well. There's been a stern position by the government that they move forward as is and look into things like provisional measures when you go to the ICJ instead of getting a protocol, and having some of these other mechanisms in place. Do you think that the opposition would compromise on some of these conditions that they have set?
I believe that we can compromise on them so long as we are achieving the goal that we are setting out to achieve. I don't think there's any compromise when it comes to getting our voters on there and the diaspora vote, but that's again just my personal opinion. I'm not the leader of the party. I may not even be the majority of the party. But those are my personal conditions. The Sarsoon Protocol, ensuring that we don't disenfranchise Belizeans from this very important vote. So once we are able to address these concerns, at least in my mind, I am comforted and I'm comfortable moving forward.
Isn't it that perhaps
Sorry.
there has been a divorce from bipartisanship simply because, and this is just from a layman's point of view, that whichever party proceeds and does so successfully in taking this matter before the ICJ, there is political gains to
Yeah, I've been one of those that I don't see that, Isani. I'm not one pushing that at all. The truth is that we have had somewhat of a bipartisan approach up until 2016, as early as late as that.
It was when the protocol was signed that there was a clear...
Yes, when I think it was in Istanbul. And from what I hear, and again, I was not in Istanbul, and so I would have to hear the foreign minister's side of this story. But from what I can gather from that, Belize was not prepared, and that is regrettable. We were not prepared to put out what our conditions were, what we were willing to agree to in terms of a Sarsoon Protocol, and that is completely unacceptable to me if that is the case. And so what we had was a breakdown in the bipartisan approach, because that is something so critical for us in the opposition that we have to respect the Sarsoon. There must be respect from Guatemala in the Sarsoon. And if we could not achieve that, then I totally understand why we don't have this bipartisan approach. So the government has to do everything it can to reach across the aisle and say, listen, we're sorry for what happened in Istanbul. Let us go back to the table with them. We are now prepared. Here is what we propose, and let's see what Guatemala will say. It's all about negotiation, Isani. And if we cannot get to the table with Guatemala, and if we are not prepared to go to the table, then I don't see us making any headway.
Now let's move forward to some of the current issues. We know that the Senate meeting is taking place, and the opposition had a meeting in formalizing your own position. Senator Woods has come out openly as someone who is voting yes and proposes the yes vote and going to the ICJ.
Yes.
Are you aware as to what will take place in the Senate today?
I have no idea, Marlene. I know that it is normally Senator Courtney, Senator Thompson, and Senator Woods that would be in the Senate today. I'm not sure if that will be the constitution on our side, but I don't know. I have no idea.
As a member of the party, what's your view on this?
That we should be free to vote our conscience on this particular issue. I've always maintained that that we all hold different views, and I always value the fact that in the People's United Party we are entitled to express ourselves freely. So if it is that Ms. Woods finds that this bill has satisfied in her mind the moving forward to the ICJ and moving forward to the referendum, then by all means she should follow her heart.
Let's reel and come again. Let me ask you the same question that she's asking from another point of view, just so we have clarity on what is being said here. As a senator, you're representing
The party.
a party or an organization.
Yes.
Right? A specific interest group, so to speak. Isn't it then that it's the directive of the party or the group that you represent that you would be voting on?
And you're totally right.
An individual position being taken?
That is true as well, Isani, but at the same time we have to consider the fact that Ms. Woods, Senator Woods, is an independent person, a free thinker. And so when the party put her in that position, you ought to know that Ms. Woods has very strong views, opinionated views, and we have to respect that. And again, that is the beauty about our party. We have qualified, talented individuals who can express themselves in different ways. And so is it that we value that, or is it that we want you to just say, to go against your own principles and vote along with the party? But I totally understand your point. She's not an elected member, unlike the Right Honorable Said Musa. She is appointed by the party, and so I appreciate your point in that regard.
And let me be devil's advocate here. Had your father taken a different position in the House, would you have a different view today?
If he had taken a different
Position in the House.
What do you mean?
If he had voted in accordance with the party.
Would I? No, I know he would have gone against his personal convictions, and I would say that, you know, if he had polled his division and his division was saying, Mr. Musa, we trust you in this, you're out there representing us, that's what you're doing on the national stage, is representing Fort George, and we want you to vote your conscience, then go ahead and do that. So he has that responsibility as well to represent his people's wishes, which is different from a Senate appointment, a senator being appointed by a party. He was elected to represent a people, and if his people's position is go and vote yes, then by all means.
All right, so let's talk about moving forward. What is the plan from you as an area rep and from the party moving forward for a potential referendum within the next month?
In terms of my personal position, being the area representative for Caribbean Shores, I have made it a point not to tell voters, because a lot of voters come to me and they say, what are you going to do? How should I vote? And immediately I tell them, well, let us get educated, let us get informed. We have to look at all the facts of this case. And at the end of the day, if you are satisfied that we have a strong case, if you are satisfied, then by all means go ahead and vote yes. What you should not be doing, and this is something that I insist on, is to blindly follow any politician because they are saying yes or no. What you should not be doing is, if someone tries to offer you money for a particular vote to go yes or no, please don't do that. Not on this important national issue, and certainly not at election time either. So those two things I keep...
There's a general thinking, Kareem, that is exactly what's going to play out on referendum day.
Yes,
I mean, I don't want to seem cynical, but that is the way people are thinking, that there will be perhaps a $50 handout that says, okay, vote in this particular way.
And if ever there was a time, Isani, for us to impart that on the Belizean people, it is now that this vote should not be about that. This is about our sovereignty and our territorial integrity and our independence as a nation. We need to educate ourselves, we need to be informed, and we need to vote our conscience, not based on any politician and certainly not based on money.
Have you polled your constituency?
I'll be honest with you, I have, and it goes up and down, but certainly there is a 50-50. There is a 50-50. And I always go back to the fact that on the panel that the Prime Minister had at the Biltmore, 5 out of the 6 of them on that stage are Caribbean Shores voters, and they were all for yes. My dad, the Prime Minister, the Foreign Minister, Asad Schuman, Lisa, I think, votes in the Freetown constituency. Godfrey Smith is in Caribbean Shores. And so we have a very diverse view in Caribbean Shores, and that is why I have to respect all views, whether it's a yes or a no. Like I said, we have.
How many people are undecided? What percentage would you say are undecided in your polls?
I would say about 1/3. About 1/3 of the constituency is undecided.
Many have watched this process for the referendum, and I hate to put it in this perspective, but it is something that we hear very often. That this is somewhat of a litmus test for the political parties heading into an election year. That perhaps it is an opportunity for the government, for the United Democratic Party and the PUP to see where they have more support. If it's a no vote, then the PUP is in the lead. If it's a yes vote, the UDP is.
Yes. I don't happen to hold that view, and I've said that publicly before. I don't think that it is a litmus test. A lot of people in my party, I can tell you, do find that it is a litmus test. But again, I don't like to play politics with this issue.
Which is exactly what I was going to ask.
I don't think that we should be playing politics
that
with
lends
the issue.
that further lends to the
Yeah.
politicization of the
Absolutely, I agree with you on that, and that should not be the case, that we are pushing a no vote because it would mean that the UDP would fall. I don't see that should not be on any of our minds in the opposition, and certainly I would want it to be the same in the government side, because I know that many on that side feel that a yes vote would give them that strength and power that they've been missing for a couple of years now.
Would you say you're the minority in the party to view it that way?
I would say that I know of individuals who share my view. I have not dug into the mindset of every single area representative to see what they're thinking, if this is at the, because nobody has publicly said that. So you know, sorry, thanks. Nobody has publicly said that, and so I don't think, you know, I can't speak on that as to what I know that what our position is in terms of the People's Declaration, and certainly politics does not come into play there.
So when you encounter your undecided voters in Caribbean shores, people who are hearing, well, listen, one party is saying this, the other party is saying that. I hear all this information. They're the yes people, the no people. What do you say to them about how to make the decision?
Well, the first thing I tell them is that you have to go out and vote, because that is your franchise, and so many people have been disenfranchised that you must go and express yourselves. Secondly, you must inform yourselves. You have to look at all the facts. Indeed, the educational campaign from the government has been very one-sided. I tried to set up a forum in my constituency with the government side and with some opposing views, and unfortunately it did not materialize because I wanted a no position, a strong no position. I wanted to have somebody that felt we need to get it right, and certainly somebody from the government side pushing the yes vote. I think that any forum moving forward, if the government is to have it, must have three of those differing views on their panel. Again, that didn't materialize in my constituency. Now that we have more time, I will try to push for it again. But I do not want just a one-sided educational campaign. So the key is to get informed still. We still have some time to get informed before we go to the polls, whenever that is.
All right. Well, thank you for coming in and having this conversation with us.
Thank you so much as well.
We're going to go ahead and take a break, and we'll be back in a few. Stay tuned.